Hey, John Gilroy here. Today, we're going to talk about software factories and the federal government. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, a podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator in the virtual studio. Today is Jorge Lopez. He's the Vice President, Security Operations and Trust and Safety at GitLab, GITLAB. Software factories, the federal government. What are you talking about, Jorge? Doesn't make any sense, does it?
I'll happily talk about software factory. Certainly, it's a relatively new term, but it really, when you think about it, is software is produced just like cars are produced or cakes are produced. Yeah. And so the software factory term really means that pipeline that turns code into something that consumers, citizens will actually use. And what is inside that factory is the same as any other factory. You have processes for how you build, how you test the product that you are producing. It has your compliance requirements for whatever product you're producing. Same in the software world. The DoD's own DevSecOps reference design defines it almost exactly in those terms. It's a pipeline with its own tools, workflows, and automated activities across the software lifecycle. So that is basically the software factories, is that aggregation of process, people, technology, and requirements that produce software from an idea all the way to a final consumption service.
Well, I'm an old guy, so I read books with pieces of paper and stuff like that. And there was a book years ago written by a guy named Clayton Christensen. It was called The Innovator's Dilemma. I'm sure you read that. Mm-hmm. And what it said was, and this is kind of, good precedent. It's like, well, in order to get innovation with a big company, you got to isolate a certain group of people and not have them subject to the culture of the big company and come up with innovation. And so when I think of a software factory for the Air Force, what they did is they said, okay, let's get a bunch of people in Boston. We'll call it Kessel Run, and this will be a software factory, and it'll be physically removed from the Washington, D.C. swamp. And all of a sudden, you get creativity and efficiency. It seems like classic Business 101 with Clayton Christensen, doesn't it?
It sure does. And you're touching on a nerve. I'll tell you a very quick story. I went to college. I did the ROTC program. I majored in computer science. And once I got my specialty from the Air Force, you select your desired specialties. What are you going to do? Pilot. Of course, I wanted to be a pilot, but couldn't. Long story short, I selected to be a software developer, a software programmer. And I got selected to be a software programmer for the Air Force. So to build software. And It just so happens that just before I graduated, the Air Force decided we're no longer going to produce software in the Air Force. We're going to completely contract that out. And we eliminated basically that career field for people like me. And yes, it seems they have turned around and decided, we do need a capability to write our own software, given the speed at which things are moving and our unique requirements.
Now, no, there's a lot of innovation, but it isn't all roses. There are some issues and concerns there. So let's, we're not going to disparage, Kessel Run or all the other, 50 different software factories, but, things aren't perfect everywhere. So what are the biggest gaps in a DevSecOps in a factory situation like this?
From my perspective, I am a blue teamer. I'm focused on cyber defense. So when I think about what are the big gaps today, are visibility into those pipelines. It is the team that comes together to defend that pipeline so that the software that is produced is exactly what you intended to produce. So one of those big gaps today is that collaboration between the software factory and the team that is defending the entire enterprise, of which the software factory is one part. So that's in one level, that is one of the gaps that I see. The other is that running a factory of any kind is incredibly complex. And there are a lot of components to creating what you're creating in that factory. There's the raw materials, there are the third-party dependencies that you may have to bring in to create the product. There's, again, that compliance, that governance, or those requirements that you have to meet. And those all apply in the software world as well. with the added complexity that is just complicated in nature. It's a lot harder to understand software or software dependency than it might be to understand a piece of metal or screws for that matter. And so that complexity leads to sometimes finding the easy way of making things work, but the easy way of making things work might not be the most secure.
Yeah.
And that is where attackers are focusing today, on attacking those weak points within that software factory.
So, Jorge, this isn't a perfect situation, and you mentioned some gaps there. I look at supply chain vulnerability as one possible gap there. So, is this a technology problem? Is it a budget problem? Is it culture? Is it an organizational problem? So we know we got some concerns here. So what kinds of problems are these?
I think it's really all three of them. But organizational comes first because I think it drives the other two. Again, starting from where I sit, the security operations team, which is tasked with defending the entire enterprise, might not be talking to the team that's running the software factory or the pipeline. And that's usually the platform engineering team, or it's the DevOps team, whatever the agency might call it, or it might be a third party, of course, software factory. But they usually sit in different reporting chains, they use different tools, and they speak different languages, not literally like we were talking earlier on Spanish and Portuguese, but just different language in what they care about and what they're concerned about. Security might be thinking attackers, indicators of compromise, network flows, endpoints, while the engineering team is thinking about builds, deployments, software requirements, availability. They always obviously care about their software or service being available. So again, the language and the focus is very different, and neither side is wrong. They just don't share the same picture or the same language. And that split creates a technology gap as well, where you may have a software factory that's running and instrumenting for what they need. But the security team that's supposed to be monitoring to ensure that that pipeline is healthy and secure might not be deploying any security tooling because maybe they have not been talking to that team. And so there is no common picture of what is happening in the pipeline that serves both needs, the software delivery as well as the defensive requirements that you have on that software factory.
Well, Lord, hey, we're going to switch from technology to human beings because these human beings are writing code in these software factories. You know, I remember when I had teenage kids, I used to tell them that there are none so blind as he who will not see. What does that mean, Dad? Well, sometimes you get so absorbed in your sports team that you don't see any of their teams out there, or your technology, Apple aficionados. But I would imagine that there are teams that get so they don't see the problems that are there. So what happens when teams don't have a strong understanding of what's going on and the problems in the agency? Maybe they don't want to believe, do they?
Absolutely. I think the most immediate cause is detection time or detection period. If you don't have monitoring in place, you're likely only going to know you have a problem when the problem has manifested. And what I mean by that is when an attacker goes after the software factory or the CI/CD pipeline, that's usually not their objective. They're usually going after another objective. And that objective could be compromising a third party, compromising citizens, compromising warfighters, because they want to get to the software. Maybe they want to get to the software that is being produced. And then once that software gets deployed, then that's what they were interested in. Or they might be interested in compromising many companies. And so by compromising one company and compromising the software that gets delivered, they might then compromise many other companies. So if you do not have that visibility, you may not know that you have been compromised until your constituents or your citizens or your warfighters or other companies start telling you, hey, I think we have a problem here. And by then, of course, the damage potentially has already been done. So compromising that software factory is usually the means to achieving something. And I think that is the worst case scenario of what can happen here when you don't have this right relationship, this right focus on defending that software factory.
You mentioned blue team, and I'll give you a blue team question here. So paint a picture for me here, from a blue team perspective. So walk me through what happens when the compromise hits this CI/CD pipeline itself. So let's say I'm John Gilroy, the attacker. So what am I going after really then?
Yeah, so at a very technical, well, I guess at a high level, first, I'll say you're going after secrets, you're going after trust, and you're going after reach. Usually all three, but maybe one or two of those. There's another angle that maybe I will add, which is they might also go for money. And I explain each of those very quickly. First, secrets. The software factory and the pipeline by which software is provided is full of credentials. It can be cloud keys to AWS or Azure, for example, where you might be deploying software or running a service. It's also deployment tokens that allow you to like publish code. It's signing keys, which allow you to write software as an organization. So that actually takes it out of the software factory, and now anybody can create software as if they were you, and so on and so forth. API tokens, etc. There's a variety of secrets. So they want to go after those secrets in order to be able to write software as if they were you, or they want to compromise other enterprises, or they want to get the data that's sitting on those cloud repositories, or they want to get your software. They want to get your intellectual property that's sitting on that CI/CD pipeline. So that's the secrets first, is going after that plethora of secrets that allow them to do many other things, including persisting on that environment. Second one is what I will call trust, is when an attacker is trying to, again, compromise the code that you're running or producing in that software factory, and then leveraging your name and your reputation to, again, perform other actions. There was a very popular, or I shouldn't say popular, there was a very noteworthy incident that happened around December 2020, where a company's build process, their software factory was compromised, and the software they produced was compromised, and it had a backdoor installed in it, so it would allow attackers to be able to access that. And there were 18,000 customers, including federal agencies, that were compromised before anyone caught it. And again, that's abusing the trust, is leveraging the software that this company produces to go and compromise many other companies. And the third one is reach, which related to the previous one around trust. But when you think about all of those secrets and what I'm able to do with a compromised pipeline, I might be able to also run other things. It could be ransomware. It could be other effects across a vast majority of, or a vast number of agencies or citizens or customers. And again, the idea is I want breach, I want blast radius, I want to get most for my actions, and getting that reach through somebody else's software supply chain will be a great way of achieving that blast radius. Last but not least is abuse. And we fight this all the time at GitLab, but I know many others are also facing this challenge of, if I'm able to compromise you, I can use your resources for my own financial benefit. And so that is another consequence that you may have when you leave this software pipeline up for attackers to grab.
Yeah, yeah. My daughter finished a master's degree in financial analysis. She had a whole course in risk management. But we're not going to talk about risk management from an academic perspective. We're going to talk about it from a software factory. So if you work for an agency, maybe a federal agency or military agency, and you understand there's risk involved, so how do you mitigate that risk? How do you manage the risk of code coming from a software factory?
Yeah, a few things. I'll say, starting with the easy ones that don't require any budget. I will start by understanding, does your agency have a software factory? Does your company have a software factory? Or more simply, do they produce software? And if that's the case, then go talk to your defenders, go talk to your security operations team, to your blue team, and ask, hey, do we have any monitoring? Go ask who's responsible for identity and access management to that platform, and to the secrets management for all those secrets that I was just referring to that are running on that pipeline. And just overall understand, what is your security posture? This is somewhat analogous to that classic first step in security of just inventory. But I think more importantly is inventory first if you have a software factory or if you're producing software, and then make sure your defenders are aware and are tracking it. Secondly is there's a lot of things you can do to really improve your security posture when it comes to those secrets that you're using in that pipeline. So to reduce the risk of the things that I talked about earlier is go understand how secrets are being managed inside of those pipelines. There's things you can do like deploying a secrets manager so you eliminate secrets from being on that CI/CD pipeline or at least reduce them. Use properly scoped tokens so that you're not granting every right possible, but you're only granting the rights that are needed for the operations that are being conducted in that pipeline, etc. And then third, related to the first point, if you do not have monitoring in place today, establish that. Make sure your security operations team is talking to your platform engineering or to your DevOps team. Make sure you're ingesting the logs of what is happening in that software factory and go conduct a tabletop of how you will respond to any of the common software factory incidents that have been making the news over the last year.
Yeah. Jorge, I'm a very, very sophisticated researcher. So before this interview, I went to Google Trends and I typed in software factory. And I didn't know what was going to happen. Well, software factory's been around for a while, and we got a little hockey stick action here. Lot going on. And you can, if you're listening to this now, you can go home and type the same in or in your phone and find the same thing. So a lot of interest. So there are many different types of factories out there. Some companies own, some don't. Some are owned by the federal government, some are different. So there must be different ways to approach a software factory if it's in your backyard versus if it's a independent third party or something. So different approaches here. Is that right?
Yes, but the risk doesn't change. I think the agency owns the consequences either way, whether it's a first-party software factory or an external software factory. So what changes is how you verify that software factory. I think when you own that software factory yourself, you have direct access, you can instrument your pipeline, you can set your access policy, you can monitor, as I talked about earlier, and you can feed all of that into your defenders. You're completely monitoring, you have full control. But when a vendor owns a software factory or when you have contracted that software factory, then you may not have that direct line of sight. So it becomes a trust but verify. And this is something where obviously we have things like FedRAMP or CMMC, which I know is changing very recently. There's some announcements around how that's changing. There's SBOM that's also undergoing a little bit of change. But ultimately, you have to trust but verify that with your vendors. Make sure your contracts have very strict requirements on notifications for incidents, for potential compromise of your software pipeline, and just again exercise the same tabletop exercises with those software vendors. Make sure you ask questions about how they're protecting their CI/CD pipeline, and whenever there's a new attack, something that I see a lot of in my line of work, I have a lot of companies that are contacting me when there's a compromise in the news. When I say me, I really mean the company. They're contacting us in GitLab, asking about X or Y compromise. Are we aware? How are we responding to it? I hardly ever hear that from our government vendors or our government partners and agencies. Not that I'm inviting more questions, but I do think this is a practice where agencies want to be more proactive in asking more about their vendors and how they're treating certain very noteworthy software factory attacks that are happening.
I was speaking to a gentleman who was a CIO of the Patent and Trademark Office just yesterday. I sat down and had lunch with him. And we talked about AI, of course, mandatory. And he said that it changes the posture for the attacker and the defender. So you're the blue team guy here, Jorge. So how does AI impact this math for being a defender?
Great question. We're all building the plane as we fly it, as we say it. I would say the first thing is that it compresses time on both sides of the fight, which is what makes it really different from previous technology trends or changes. On the build side of the house, AI really means more code, written faster by not only people, but by AI or people that have never actually written code before. This is something that we have done research and we found that this is something that GitLab did research on, and we found that 78% of organizations say developers are writing and committing code faster ever since they adopted AI. But again, they're not the only ones. We have now people in finance, in HR, etc., that have never written code that are now creating code. And they're doing that via AI tools. So that's on the one side, we have more volume. The other part is a lot of times AI is writing more code that nobody has understood or reviewed because it's impossible to review all the code. So you have AI producing code and AI reviewing code. And so this is difficult for us as a defensive organization because now you usually have a person that's behind the code being submitted or actions being taken. Now you have an agent. And so it's very important to understand where is that responsibility. And that is not a technology decision. That is a process decision in the organization of what are the humans in the loop going to look like? And what is the responsibility when an agent is writing code? Is the agent behind is the human behind the agent responsible, or is it only the agent? So that's on the one side. On the build side, just a lot more code with contributions that are not only coming from traditional developers, but other employees, and now also with AI agents. On the attacker side, it also means a lot of faster actions. Because now when a software factory is compromised, you may no longer have a piece of software running or human behind the keyboard performing actions. You may have a fully autonomous agent that's conducting actions at machine speed. And if as a defender, you're still operating at human speed, that will put you at a disadvantage. You're really compressing that timeline when you introduce AI.
Okay, let's go to Boston. So Boston, Monday morning, could put you on a plane there. And so you see a young person on a bicycle going down to the Kessel Run software factory. You stop them and say, hey, young lady, don't be scared. Hey, so if you could do that, I don't know. So what would be some suggestions you'd give to them, first thing on Monday morning to make the software factory more secure? What would give the most bang for the buck, huh?
Well, I'm glad if they're riding their bike, it means it's not winter. So that's a good start. But I will say the first thing I go back a little bit to an earlier question. I will go ask, hey, is your agency developing software? And if so, make sure you go talk to your defenders. Go talk to your security operations team or cyber defense team, whatever you call them in your agency, and just ask them, hey, what platform do you use for building that software? And see if they give you an answer.
Yeah.
Ask them, do you have logs for that platform? Assuming that they have an answer, do you have those logs in your SIEM or do you have them in your security data lake? And then ask them, have you ever reviewed the logs? Do you know what's in there in those logs? And have you ever had an incident related to that platform? Have you written any custom detections to find anomalous activity? If the answer is we do develop software, and the answer is no to any of the other questions, I think that is your low-hanging fruit right there. Good. Go get the security operations team to go meet with the team that owns the development platform or the software factory. Get them in the same room and get them to start talking. Learn who they are, how they work, and especially any third-party implications, like do they have contractors or external parties contributing software? Do they have third-party technologies that they're utilizing? Well, obviously, they do have. So make that a continuous conversation. Make it a cycle of maybe a monthly meeting to understand what is changing, what activities are normal, and start really that inventory of activity, but also of pipelines that are running, actors behind those pipelines. And that's step one. And step two, I go back to secrets. Make sure you go talk to the people responsible for all the secrets that are running on the CI/CD pipeline and understand how are you managing secrets today? Are you using least privilege? Are you assuming compromise? And I think that will be my Monday morning action for that unfortunate lady that found me on the way.
If you don't get arrested, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Lord, I'm going to tell you something surprising. Last month, there was a little team from Spain that paid another team in this game called soccer. I think the name was from Argentina or something. No one watched the game. No one cared about that. But they had a result. So they had a score at the end. So you know who won that game. So you had some key performance indicators. So I think the team from Spain kind of won that little KPI battle. Okay, what about for a CISO. What about a federal CISO? So what's the signal? How do they know what good looks like? Is there a KP? Is there a score? I mean, how would you know how am I doing? Hey, Jorge, how you doing? Well, I mean, how do you know how you're doing?
Well, first of all, I'm doing great because Spain is my team, so I'm pretty happy today. But to your question, which I think is the more important one, the signal I would look for is first, how much knowledge is there in the team? Like a mature team can tell you on a random Tuesday, hey, what's running in your factory? What changed recently and who changed it? Without opening a special investigation to find out. I would also ask, hey, when was the last incident that we had? And the team can tell you. And I always, or at least the last investigation that we had related to the CI/CD pipeline. Again, a mature team will be able to tell you, oh, yes, this is what happened. This is the activity that we saw, and this was the outcome. The second signal I will ask is collaboration. Like I will ask, hey, when was the last time we communicated with the DevOps team? When was the last time they called us to go help with some data point or go help figure out how we will secure something? And then the last one, maybe if there's been an incident in the news recently, I will ask them, hey, what are we doing about this incident that happened somewhere else? Or how does this incident affect us? Or how would it apply to us? And see, again, if you get a quick answer or if they have to go figure it out and it takes days or weeks to get an answer of how will this incident apply to us? Yeah. There was a really big incident. I'll close on a very quick story. There was a big incident last year with a software package called Trivi, and very well-known software package. A lot of people used it. And that's the type of incident that when it happens, a CISO should go out and ask, hey, what if this was us? What if we were one of the companies that was using this package?
Yeah,
assuming that they were not.
Yeah.
And again, if the team is on top of things and mature in this regard, they will be able to answer very quickly. And to answer very quickly doesn't mean that, oh, yes, this will never have happened to us. I'm expecting more of, if this has happened, if this was us, we would have caught it here, or we have this weakness in this other area, so we're going to go close that gap. But again, I'm looking for like the time to get those answers, because that gives me confidence that the team really understands the risk as well as our own environment.
Well, software factories went from being a big innovation to something that's common now and have to be managed like other aspects of software development. Kind of interesting. And the fact that we're even talking about this in the federal government is great. Now, if you are listening to this podcast and walking a dog, what I'll do is I'll put a link to GitLab in the show notes here, and you can find out more that's going on and maybe get a hold of Jorge and find out some of the stories about why Spain won and why Argentina lost in the World Cup, huh? You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Jorge Lopez, Vice President, Security Operations and Trust and Safety at GitLab, GITLAB.